My name is Clara Reed, and I used to believe love could survive anything. Distance, mistakes, silence. I thought it could heal itself if you held on long enough. But I was wrong. Sometimes love breaks quietly, like glass slipping from your hand, and you don't even hear it shatter until it's already gone. When I married Ethan, I thought I'd found peace. We weren't perfect, but we were safe. He was calm where I was fire, steady where I was storm. We had a little apartment near the river, and every Sunday morning he'd bring me coffee before I even opened my eyes. He'd say, "You're my favorite part of every day." I used to believe him. I used to believe everything he said. Then my mother moved in. Her name was Helen, strong, graceful, the kind of woman who could make any room softer just by walking into it. She had spent her whole life taking care of others, first as a teacher, then as a widow raising 2 daughters alone. When her house went under renovation after a storm, it felt natural to invite her to stay. I thought it would be good for her, for us. I had no idea I was opening the door to the end of my marriage. At first, it was beautiful. She brought light into the house. She filled the silence with laughter and the smell of cinnamon bread. Ethan loved having her around. He said it reminded him of his own mother, who'd passed when he was a child. I saw nothing wrong with it. How could I? I loved them both. I loved watching them smile at each other across the table, their eyes full of kindness. But slowly, that kindness turned into something else. It started small. Ethan began cooking her favorite meals: apple pie, creamy pasta, lemon tea with honey, dishes he'd never made for me before. He asked her about her past, her childhood, her first love. I'd walk into the room and find them lost in conversation, their laughter melting together like music I didn't know the tune to. At first, I was proud. My husband and my mother getting along, what could be better? But pride turned to unease when I started noticing the looks between them. The long, soft looks that said more than words ever could. One evening, I came home early from work. The apartment smelled like fresh cookies. I walked into the kitchen and saw them standing close, too close. She was showing him something on her phone, and when she laughed, he touched her arm, just lightly. Just long enough for my heart to stop. They both froze when they saw me. My mother smiled too quickly. "We were just talking about that old movie you love," she said. Ethan nodded, his voice tight. "Yeah, the one with the rain scene." I forced a smile and pretended I believed them. But that night, when we went to bed, Ethan didn't touch me. He turned his back and said he was tired. Days passed. The laughter between them grew louder. I told myself it was in my head, that I was being jealous for no reason. But then Ethan started wearing the cologne my mother once said smelled warm and comforting. He started using her favorite phrases, little things like, "Time heals everything," or "The heart remembers what it wants." One Sunday, we were all having breakfast when my mother's necklace broke. It was a simple silver chain she'd worn for years. Before I could move, Ethan picked it up and said, "I can fix this." He spent hours in the garage repairing that tiny piece of jewelry. When he brought it back to her, she smiled with tears in her eyes. She kissed his cheek and said, "You're a good man, Ethan," and I swear something shifted in the air. That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. I whispered, "Do you still love me?" He didn't answer. Maybe he was asleep. Maybe he just didn't know. Weeks turned into months. My mother's house was finished, but she didn't move out. "It's too quiet there alone," she said. I wanted to argue, to scream, but instead I nodded. Because saying no felt cruel, and because I was afraid that if she left, Ethan would follow her. One evening I walked into the living room and saw them dancing. No music, just silence and the soft shuffle of feet. Her hands rested on his shoulders. His eyes were closed. When they noticed me, they stepped apart, laughing awkwardly. My heart stopped beating for a moment. Later that night, I asked him, "Do you think about her?" He looked confused. "She's your mother, Clara, that's not what I asked." He sighed. "You're imagining things." I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to. But the next morning, I found a note in his jacket pocket, my mother's handwriting. It said, "You make me feel young again." I felt the world tilt. When he came home that evening, I asked him about it. He stared at me for a long moment and said softly, "She needed someone to remind her that life isn't over yet." And that someone had to be my husband? I asked. He said nothing. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair where my mother usually sat. I thought about the years she spent raising me, the sacrifices she made, the nights she stayed awake comforting me after heartbreaks. I thought about how love, no matter how pure, can turn poisonous when it crosses the wrong line. I didn't cry that night. I think I was too numb. The next morning, I made breakfast like everything was fine. Ethan kissed my forehead before leaving for work. My mother smiled at me across the table, her eyes full of something I couldn't name. Guilt, maybe. Or pity. I washed the dishes slowly, each sound echoing like a clock counting down to the moment everything would break. When I went to her room later, I found her suitcase half-packed. "Are you leaving?" I asked. She froze. "I think it's best." "For who?" "For all of us." I wanted to scream, to throw the suitcase across the room, to demand answers, but I didn't. I just said, "You should go today." She nodded. That afternoon, Ethan drove her to the station. When he came back, he stood by the window, staring at nothing. I asked, "Do you love her?" He turned slowly and said, "I don't know." And that answer broke me more than any confession could have. That night, after he fell asleep, I packed a small bag. I left a note on the kitchen table. "You already chose." Then I walked out into the rain. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay. The rain soaked through my clothes as I walked aimlessly through the city's streets. Every light, every reflection reminded me of them, of her perfume, his voice, the laughter that used to fill our home. By the time I reached my sister's door, I was shaking. She didn't ask questions. She just hugged me and said, "You're safe now." But safety doesn't mean peace. Peace comes much later, after the pain, after the anger, after you've learned how to breathe again without choking on memories. I lay in her spare room that night, staring at the ceiling, hearing the echo of Ethan's voice saying, "I don't know." And I realized that maybe love doesn't die in betrayal. Maybe it dies in the spaces between words, in everything left unsaid. The next morning my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Please come home, we need to talk." I didn't reply. Because some things can't be talked through. Some things can only be left behind. The morning after I left, the sun rose pale and cold, like it didn't want to shine on my story anymore. My sister made me tea and tried to talk, but every sound in the house felt too loud, too alive for the silence inside me. I wanted to disappear into something that didn't remind me of him or her, or the woman I used to be before everything broke. I spent the first few days pretending I was fine. I went for long walks, cleaned things that didn't need cleaning, stared at the phone waiting for a message I swore I wouldn't answer. But every night I read the same text over and over again. "Please come home, we need to talk." On the 5th night, I almost did. I put on my coat, picked up my keys, stood by the door, and froze. Because I realized something. If I went back, I'd be returning to the same silence that had destroyed me. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to remember who I was without him. So I turned off my phone and walked out into the dark. The streetlights flickered like they were whispering secrets to each other. I walked until my feet ached, until the city started to disappear behind me, replaced by empty fields and the sound of my own breathing. I ended up by the river where Ethan and I used to walk every Sunday morning. The water looked black under the moonlight, restless, endless. I sat on the old bench we used to share and whispered, "You said I was your favorite part of every day." The wind answered with silence. When I came back to my sister's apartment, I found another message waiting for me. It wasn't from Ethan. It was from my mother. "Clara, I don't expect forgiveness. I only want you to know that I never meant for this to happen. Please believe me. Love, Mom." I threw the phone onto the bed and cried for the first time since I left. Not the kind of crying that asks for pity, but the kind that feels like your body is trying to empty itself of everything heavy. When I finally stopped, I felt hollow, not better, just empty enough to breathe again. Days turned into weeks. My sister tried to make me laugh, tried to take me out, but I felt like a ghost walking through someone else's life. I couldn't look at couples without feeling sick. I couldn't hear the word love without flinching. Then, one afternoon, while I was sitting by the window, I saw my mother's car parked outside. My heart froze. I didn't move. I watched her step out, holding a small bag in one hand and flowers in the other. She stood there for a long time, like she was waiting for me to appear. Then she looked up and saw me in the window. For a moment we just stared at each other. Two women who used to share everything, now strangers separated by something worse than distance. I went downstairs slowly. When I opened the door, she smiled, that same soft smile that used to calm every storm in my life. But now it only made me feel smaller. "Hi, sweetheart," she said quietly. "Why are you here?" I asked. My voice sounded sharper than I intended. "I just wanted to see you, to make sure you're okay." "I'm not," I said, "but you already know that." She nodded. "I know. And I'm sorry, Clara. I wish I could take it back." I shook my head. "You can't take back something that broke me." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't love him like that," she whispered. "Not the way you think. I was lonely. I felt invisible. And he made me feel seen again. But it wasn't love. It was confusion. It was wrong. I know that now." Her words were soft, but they hurt more than shouting ever could. Because they were true. I wanted to ask her why she hadn't stopped, why she hadn't chosen me. But deep down, I already knew the answer. People don't fall into betrayal because they stop loving you. They fall because they forget how to love themselves. We stood there in silence until she finally said, "He's been calling me too. He's trying to find you." I looked away. "Then he's wasting his time." She nodded slowly, as if she expected that answer. Then she reached into her bag and handed me an envelope. "He wrote this before you left." I hesitated, then took it. When she drove away, I sat on the steps, the letter shaking in my hands. I told myself not to read it. But curiosity is a cruel thing. Inside, there were only a few lines written in his careful handwriting. "I don't know when we stopped being us. I don't know when your silence started to hurt more than mine. But I do know I never meant to love her. I only missed you so much. I tried to find you in someone else." I folded the letter and stared at the street until the sky turned gray. That was the night I realized forgiveness doesn't always come with understanding. Sometimes it's just the quiet acceptance that what's broken can never be the same. Weeks passed. I found a job in a small art studio. It didn't pay much, but it kept my hands busy, and busy hands can't fall apart. I painted every night, faces blurred by rain, hearts half-finished, sunsets that looked like goodbyes. My pain turned into color, and color became survival. But even as time moved forward, some memories stayed stubborn. I'd see a man on the street wearing Ethan's jacket and feel my heart stumble. I'd hear my mother's favorite song in a cafe and lose my breath for a second. Pain doesn't leave you suddenly. It lingers, like perfume after someone's gone. One evening, after a long day at the studio, I walked by the river again. The sky was orange, the water gold, and for the first time I didn't cry. I just stood there watching the current carry everything away, the love, the betrayal, the pieces of whom I used to be. I whispered, "Maybe one day I'll be ready to go home." But even I didn't know which home I meant, the one I left behind or the one I still hadn't found. 2 years passed before I saw him again. 2 years of quiet mornings and sleepless nights, of painting faces I could never finish, of learning how to breathe without needing someone else's heartbeat beside mine. I had moved to a small coastal town by then, a place where nobody knew my name, where the waves spoke louder than my thoughts. The sea became my therapy. I'd stand by the water for hours, letting it whisper forgiveness I couldn't give myself. Sometimes I thought about Ethan, not with hate, not even with love, just with that strange ache that lives in the space between both. And sometimes I thought about my mother. I still hadn't answered her last message. I couldn't. The wound wasn't fresh anymore, but it hadn't healed either. Then, one morning, I received a letter. The envelope was thin and slightly torn, the handwriting trembling but familiar. I hesitated before opening it. My mother's voice seemed to echo in my head. "You never know what a letter carries. Sometimes it's closure, sometimes it's another storm." Inside was a short note written by my sister. "Mom's health is getting worse. She asks for you every day. Please come before it's too late." My hands went cold. I sat on the edge of my bed, the letter trembling between my fingers. The word "too late" pulsed in my chest like an alarm. I had told myself I'd never go back. Not to that house, not to those memories. But sometimes life doesn't ask what you want. It just demands what's left of your heart. That evening, I packed a small bag and took the train back to the city. Every passing mile felt like a step closer to a past I wasn't ready to face. When I arrived, the sky was gray and the streets looked smaller than I remembered. My sister met me at the station. She hugged me tightly, her eyes red. "She'd be so happy you came," she whispered. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and sorrow. I walked down the long corridor, my footsteps echoing louder than my heartbeat. When I entered the room, I saw her, my mother, thinner, older, her skin pale, her eyes soft and tired. She smiled the moment she saw me. "Clara," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "You came." I wanted to say something cruel, something honest, but when I saw the tubes, the trembling of her hand, the way her chest rose with effort, every word I'd planned disappeared. I just nodded and took her hand. It was cold, fragile, but it still felt like home. "I didn't think you'd want to see me," she said. "I didn't," I admitted softly, "but I needed to." Tears filled her eyes. "You look beautiful," she said weakly. "Just like when you were little." I smiled through the ache in my throat. "You always said that when you didn't know what else to say." She laughed quietly, and it always worked. We sat there for a long time, just holding hands. No apologies, no explanations, just the silence that carries everything words can't. Then the door opened. I turned, and my breath caught in my chest. Ethan stood there. He looked different, older, thinner, his once dark hair streaked with gray. But his eyes, they were the same. The same eyes that had once loved me, betrayed me, and haunted me all at once. He froze when he saw me. The flowers in his hands shook slightly. "Clara," he said quietly. I stood up. "What are you doing here?" He looked at my mother. "She called me," he said softly. "When she got sick. I've been helping her." The room tilted. "Helping her?" I repeated. "After everything?" He didn't answer right away. "I owed her that much," he said finally. "And I owed you an apology." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't fight. Not here." I wanted to walk out. I wanted to scream that I had nothing left to say to either of them. But when I looked at her, frail, dying, I couldn't move. I just sat down again, my hands trembling in my lap. Ethan put the flowers in a vase by her bed and sat in the corner quietly. He didn't look at me, but I could feel his presence like a weight pressing on my chest. Hours passed. The room grew darker, quieter. My mother slept, her breathing uneven. The only sound was the steady beep of the monitor. I thought about the years between then and now, all the pain, the silence, the distance, and I realized that sometimes time doesn't heal, it just teaches you how to live with the scar. When I finally stood to leave, Ethan followed me into the hallway. "Clara," he said. "Don't," I whispered. "Please don't. I need to say this," he insisted. His voice cracked. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did broke you. But I want you to know I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day." I looked at him, my throat tightening. "Then why did you love her?" His eyes filled with tears. "'Cause she reminded me of you. The version of you I lost when we stopped laughing, stopped touching, stopped being us. I was searching for you and her. And when I realized that it was already too late, I turned away, biting my lip until I tasted blood. You don't get to say that. Not now, not here." He nodded slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "You're right, but I needed you to know anyway." I walked away without looking back, but his words followed me like ghosts. I was searching for you and her. That night, I sat by my mother's bed again. She was sleeping, her breathing shallow. I touched her hand gently and whispered, "He came today." Her eyelids fluttered. "I know," she said weakly. "He's been coming every day. You both have hearts too full of sorrow and too empty of peace." I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall silently. She was right. I was full of sorrow, and maybe deep down I still loved him. When I left the hospital that night, The city felt quieter than ever. The streetlights flickered above me, and for the first time in years, I whispered to the dark, "I forgive you." But I didn't know if I was talking to my mother, to Ethan, or to myself. The following days unfolded like soft hours trapped inside a dream you can't escape. I spent every morning at the hospital, sitting beside my mother, reading her the books she used to love. The words barely reached her some days. Her eyes drifted toward the window, following the sunlight as if it were something holy. Ethan came often. Sometimes he'd bring soup, sometimes flowers, sometimes nothing but silence. He'd stand by the window and stare out, as if the city could answer the questions still locked inside him. I didn't speak to him much. I didn't need to. The air between us said enough. It said we remember. It said we can't go back. One evening, while my mother was asleep, he turned to me. "She talks about you all the time," he said softly. "She worries you still hate her." I sighed. "Hate takes too much strength. I'm tired." He nodded. "She wanted to see you smile again." I almost laughed. "She took that away from me." "She knows," he whispered. "We didn't speak again for hours." The sound of the machines became our rhythm, a heartbeat of something that was ending. I wanted to ask him if he still loved her, if he ever stopped loving me. But I didn't. Some questions only hurt the person who asks them. The next day, I arrived earlier than usual. The nurse told me my mother hadn't slept well. When I walked in, she smiled faintly, her eyes shining with that same warmth that used to light up my childhood. "I had a dream about your father," she said. "He was waiting by the sea, calling my name." I held her hand gently. "Maybe he's waiting for you again." She smiled sadly. "Maybe, but not yet. I still need to tell you something first." Her voice trembled. "You were always my strength, Clara, and I failed you. I let loneliness make me weak. But the day you left, I saw what love really meant. It wasn't what I felt for Ethan, it was what I lost with you." Tears blurred my vision. "You don't have to say this." "Yes, I do. I need you to know that I never wanted to take him from you. I just didn't know how to feel alive anymore." I kissed her forehead, my tears falling onto her skin. "I forgive you, Mom." Her eyes widened, and for a moment she looked young again, like the woman who used to braid my hair before school. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Later that day, the doctor told us she didn't have much time. Her heart was too weak. The words hit me harder than any betrayal ever could. Ethan was beside me, but I barely felt him there. That night, my mother asked us both to stay. "I don't want to wake up alone," she said softly. We sat in silence, her hand in mine, Ethan on the other side of the bed. The room was dim, the smell of medicine and lavender filling the air. I could hear her breathing, slow, uneven, fragile. At one point, she opened her eyes and looked at both of us. "Promise me you'll find peace. Both of you. Don't let me leave knowing you're still trapped in this." I squeezed her hand. "I promise." Ethan whispered, "So do I." She smiled faintly, her eyes fluttering. "Then I can rest." Hours passed. I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember was the sudden stillness. The monitor was silent. Her hand, once warm, felt cold in mine. "Mom?" I whispered. Nothing. The nurse came rushing in, and then everything blurred. Voices, movement, the sound of Ethan calling my name. I couldn't hear him. All I could hear was the echo of her last breath. I sat by her side until dawn, staring at the sunrise she never got to see. Ethan stood near the window, motionless. When the nurse finally covered her with a sheet, something inside me cracked. He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "Clara, I'm so sorry." I turned to him, my face blank. "You should be." He nodded, tears running down his face. "I'll go. I'll leave you alone." I didn't answer. I just looked at my mother's still face and whispered, "She wouldn't want that." He hesitated. "What do you want, Clara?" I thought about that for a long moment. "I don't know," I said finally. "But not this. Not anymore." When he left the room, I sat there in silence, the sunlight touching her face through the curtain. I realized forgiveness isn't one moment, it's 1,000 quiet decisions to keep living after everything breaks. The funeral was small, I didn't want flowers or music. I just wanted to hear the sound of the wind through the trees. I placed a white rose on her coffin and whispered, You can rest now." Ethan stood far in the back, head bowed, hands shaking. So when it was over, he approached me slowly. "She loved you more than anyone," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. "That's why it hurts so much." He nodded, his voice breaking. "I'm leaving town, I think it's time. I didn't ask where. I just said good." He gave me one last look, not a plea, not an apology, just a look that said, "Thank you for letting me go." Then he turned and walked away. I stood there for a long time, watching him fade into the distance until he disappeared completely. That night, the world felt heavier, quieter, but not unbearable. I sat by my window and whispered, "It's over, Mom." But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Some stories don't end with goodbye. They end when you finally learn to live with what's left. The next morning, I took the train back to the coast. I watched the landscape roll by, cities shrinking into fields, fields melting into sea. When I arrived, the air smelled of salt and rain. I walked straight to the shore, took off my shoes, and let the water touch my feet. The sea was calm that day, as if it already knew my pain. I closed my eyes and whispered, "If forgiveness has a shape, maybe it looks like this." And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since before everything fell apart. Peace, fragile but real. Time became something strange after my mother's death, a blur of sunrises and sunsets that all looked the same. Some days I painted until my fingers ached, other days I just stared at the sea, trying to remember what silence felt like before it became loneliness. Grief is a quiet visitor, it doesn't knock or shout. It just sits beside you, patient and endless, whispering memories you don't want to remember. I stopped answering calls. I stopped opening letters. The only sound that kept me company was the sea brushing against the shore, constant, forgiving, alive. One morning, while I was cleaning the small gallery I'd opened near the coast, a young couple walked in. They looked at the paintings in silence, portraits of women staring at the ocean, faces half-finished, eyes full of rain. The woman said softly, "They all look like they're waiting for someone." I smiled weakly. Maybe they are. After they left, I sat on the floor, surrounded by my own ghosts. That's when I realized I had painted my mother again, her silhouette standing at the edge of the water, her dress blowing in the wind. No matter how much I tried to move on, my memories always found their way back onto the canvas. That evening, I went to the beach and watched the waves swallow the sun. The air smelled like salt and forgiveness. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Are you still watching me, Mom?" The wind answered softly like a sigh. I lived like that for months, quiet, isolated, painting, breathing, surviving. Until one afternoon I saw him again. Ethan. He was standing near the rocks, his back to me, staring at the horizon as if waiting for something to return. For a moment, I thought it was a trick of light, a memory dressed as reality. But then he turned, and our eyes met. My heart stopped. He looked older, his beard rough, his clothes worn. But his eyes, those eyes I used to know so well, still carried the same gentleness, the same regret. He didn't smile, didn't move. He just looked at me like a man seeing sunlight after years of darkness. I froze. My hands trembled, but I didn't run. Maybe because I was too tired of running from ghosts that followed me anyway. He took a slow step forward. "Clara," he said softly. My name sounded fragile in his mouth, like something sacred he wasn't sure he still had the right to say. I swallowed hard. "What are you doing here?" He hesitated. "I didn't know you lived here." "I came for the charity project, rebuilding houses after the storm." He pointed to the small village beyond the shore. "And then I saw your name on the gallery window." I crossed my arms, trying to steady my voice. "You should have walked away." He nodded slowly. I tried. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of waves filled the space between us, pulling at everything unsaid. Finally he said, "You look different." "So do you," I replied. "I guess time changes everything." "Not everything," I said quietly. "Some wounds just learn how to hide." He took another step closer, but I didn't move. "I didn't come to hurt you," he said. I needed to see you. To know you're okay. I'm fine. I lied." He looked down, a small smile on his lips. "You were always a bad liar." That made me laugh, softly, bitterly, but it was a laugh nonetheless. It felt strange. like remembering how to breathe. He looked at me, his eyes full of sorrow. I think about her every day. About your mother, I clenched my fists. So do I. She didn't deserve the way things ended, he whispered. None of us did, I said. The wind grew colder, the sky turned gray. For a long time we just stood there, two broken souls bound by a story neither of us asked to live. Finally he said, I've been writing letters to you. For months? Letters? I frowned. I never sent them. I didn't think you'd want to read them. But I needed to write them anyway. I hesitated, then asked quietly, Why? He looked out at the sea. Because it's the only way I could talk to you without breaking again. The honesty in his voice cracked something open in me, a place I'd buried too deep. Do you still love me? The question escaped before I could stop it. He looked at me for a long time, his eyes shining with tears he didn't try to hide. I never stopped, he said, but I know love isn't enough anymore. Something in me wanted to hate him for saying that, and another part wanted to believe every word. I turned away, my voice barely a whisper. You should go, Ethan. He nodded. I will. But if you ever need to talk, you know where to find me. He walked away slowly, his figure fading against the fog. I watched until he disappeared, then sank to the sand, crying for everything we were and everything we couldn't be. That night, I couldn't sleep. I dreamed of the sea again, but this time my mother was there, standing beside Ethan, both of them smiling. When I woke up, my pillow was wet, and my heart felt lighter, as if some invisible weight had finally loosened. The next morning, I found a letter slipped under my door. The handwriting was his. I hesitated before opening it. Clara, seeing you yesterday reminded me that pain can still look beautiful. I didn't come to stay. I came to let go. I'm leaving again, but not because I don't care. Because for the first time, I finally do. You deserve peace. You deserve to smile without remembering me. I held the letter to my chest and cried. But this time it wasn't the kind of crying that breaks you. It was the kind that heals. Later that day I stood by the sea again, the letter still in my hand. The waves brushed against my feet like an old friend, and I whispered, maybe forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. Maybe it's about letting them leave without hate. And for the first time, the wind didn't sound like my mother's voice or Ethan's apologies. It sounded like me, breathing freely, finally ready to start again. The sea became quieter after that day, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a choice. I thought I'd never see him again. But life doesn't care about our plans. It brings back the people we're still meant to understand, even when we've already said goodbye. 2 weeks later, I saw him again. It was late afternoon, the kind of golden light that turns everything soft. I was at the local market, buying paintbrushes and flowers for the gallery, when I heard someone call my name, Clara. The sound made me freeze. I turned, and there he was, Ethan, standing a few steps away, a nervous smile on his lips. His eyes met mine, full of something that looked like fear and longing mixed together. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me again, he said quietly. I wasn't sure either, I replied, my voice trembling despite the calm I tried to fake. He nodded, looking down at the ground. I'm leaving soon. The project's done. I just wanted to see you one last time. Why? I asked, though I already knew. He hesitated. Because I can't carry this anymore. The guilt, the silence, the way we left things. I took a deep breath. Then say what you need to say. We walked down to the beach, away from the noise of the town. The air smelled like rain, and the sea was calm. Waves sliding over the sand like whispers too tired to hurt. Ethan stopped near the rocks, where the tide reached our feet. I came here to tell you everything I never could, he said softly. The truth, the ugly parts, the weak parts, the parts I'm not proud of. I've crossed my arms, my heart pounding. Then say it. He took a deep breath. I loved you, Clara. I loved you more than anyone. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to love myself. And when your mother came, she didn't replace you. She reflected me, the broken me, the one who needed to feel needed again. His voice cracked, the sound raw and small against the wind. It wasn't love. It was desperation dressed as comfort. I told myself it didn't mean anything, but it did because it broke you. And I'll never forgive myself for that. I swallowed hard, my eyes stinging. Then why didn't you stop? He looked at me, tears finally falling. Because every time I saw her, I saw the part of you that had stopped believing in us. I thought maybe if I could keep her close, I'd remember how to bring you back. I stepped closer, my voice shaking. You were trying to save me by destroying me. He nodded, shame written across his face. Yes, I was a coward. I thought love could survive anything, even lies. But love built on guilt isn't love, it's punishment. The silence after that felt endless. The waves rose and fell around us, carrying our words out into the horizon. I spent years hating you, I said softly. But then one day I woke up and realized I didn't hate you anymore. I just missed who we were before everything went wrong. He looked at me, his eyes red. Do you think we could ever be those people again? I shook my head slowly. No, but maybe we could learn to forgive who we became. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that breaks your heart because you know it's goodbye disguised as peace. I never stopped praying that you'd find happiness, he said, even if it wasn't with me. I reached out, hesitating for a second before touching his hand. I did, I whispered. Not all at once, not perfectly, but I found pieces of it in the quiet, in the sea, in forgiving you. He looked down at our hands, his thumb brushing against mine, gentle, hesitant, as if afraid I'd disappear. You were always my home, he said. I smiled sadly. Then I hope you build a new one, somewhere your heart can finally rest. The sky began to darken, clouds rolling in from the horizon. Rain started to fall softly, thin and cold. We didn't move. The world felt still, suspended in that bittersweet space where love ends, but something softer begins. He took a step back, his eyes locked on mine. Goodbye, Clara. I nodded. Goodbye, Ethan. He turned and walked away, his figure fading into the mist. I watched until he was gone, until the sea swallowed the last echo of his footsteps. When I finally looked up, the rain had stopped. The sky broke open into a soft glow of pink and gold, like the world itself had exhaled. I stood there for a long time, my heart aching but free. Later that night, I sat by the window of my gallery, the smell of paint and salt filling the air. I opened my sketchbook and began to draw, two figures standing apart on a beach, rain falling between them. In the corner, I wrote one sentence. Some love stories don't end, they just stop needing to be told. When I finished, I felt something shift inside me. Not closure, not entirely, but peace. The kind that doesn't come from forgetting, but from understanding that love, even when it breaks, still leaves you better than before. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Mom. Thank you." Ethan. Outside, the sea kept moving, endless and forgiving. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing in its shadow. I felt like part of it, constant, changing, alive. Months passed, and the world slowly began to bloom again. The gallery grew quiet most days, but I liked it that way. I'd paint with the windows open, letting the sound of the sea fill every empty space that love once owned. Sometimes I'd still think of Ethan, not with pain, but with a kind of soft gratitude. He'd been the wound and the lesson, the storm and the calm that followed. Some nights, I'd imagine him walking along some other beach, maybe thinking of me too, but in a way that didn't hurt anymore. I still spoke to my mother sometimes, not aloud, but in whispers to the wind. You were right, I'd say. Love never really leaves, it just changes its shape. One evening I closed the gallery early. The sky was the color of pale gold, and the air smelled like rain about to fall. I walked down to the water, bare feet sinking into the sand. The sea was calm, the same sea that had once carried my pain, now carrying something lighter. I brought with me a small box wrapped in white cloth. Inside was the letter my mother wrote before she died, and the last note Ethan had left me. Two pieces of the same story, one that had broken me, then taught me how to live again. I knelt by the edge of the shore and whispered, "It's time." The tide reached out gently, touching my hands as if giving permission. I placed the box in the water and watched as the waves pulled it away, slow and careful, until it vanished beneath the horizon. I smiled through my tears. It felt like letting go of the last weight I'd been carrying for too long. As I stood there, the wind lifted, and for a moment, I could almost hear their voices, my mother's soft laughter, Ethan's calm whisper, fading into the sound of the waves. I whispered back, "I forgive you, both of you." And just like that, something inside me broke open, not with pain, but with peace. Over the next weeks, I began painting again, but this time the colors were different. No more gray, no more storms. My canvases filled with light, soft pinks, deep blues, sunlight breaking through clouds. Each painting felt like a breath, a quiet proof that even the most shattered hearts can find beauty again. One morning, a letter arrived at the gallery. It had no return address. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity, gentle now instead of painful, made me tear the seal. Inside there was only one line written in familiar handwriting. "If you ever find yourself by the sea, know that I'm still somewhere listening." I smiled. It wasn't a promise or a plea. It was peace. The final echo of a story that had already found its ending. That evening, I painted a new piece. It was a woman standing by the water, her hands open, the wind carrying strands of her hair into the sky. Behind her, the sea glowed like a mirror of her heart, endless, forgiving, alive. I called the painting The Quiet Tide. When I hung it on the gallery wall, I felt something inside me settle. This was the final chapter, not of loss, but of return. Because love, I had learned, isn't always about staying. Sometimes it's about letting someone go so gently that they take only the warmth, not the pain. That night, I walked down to the beach again. The stars were bright, scattered like pieces of everything I'd ever loved. I sat by the water, my dress damp with salt and wind, and closed my eyes. I thought about my mother, about Ethan, about the woman I used to be, the one who thought love had to last forever to be real. And I smiled because now I knew the truth. Love doesn't need to last forever. It just needs to change you, to break you open and make you see the world differently. I whispered into the darkness, "Thank you for teaching me how to love, even when it hurts." The sea answered in waves, soft and endless. As dawn began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I stood and took one last look at the horizon. The world felt new again, not because it had changed, but because I finally had. I turned and walked back toward the small gallery waiting behind me, my heart light, my steps sure, my soul no longer looking for what it had already found: peace. Because some stories aren't about how they end, but about how they finally let you begin again.